You are now entering the Sanctum.
Ciao, and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. I'm Jay with John, Kellen, and TJ. And it's the week of July 4th, so happy America Day. And what better way to celebrate America than talking about the 1976 Italian Giallo or Gialla classic, Deep Red, or as we're calling it this week, Deep Red, White, and Blue. Directed by the incomparable Dario Argento and featuring one of the best scores in the game, performed by Goblin, a jazz pianist and a wisecracking journalist are pulled into a complex web of mystery after the former witnesses the brutal murder of a psychic. So grab your black leather gloves and a sharp knife, and let's dive in.
So Deep Red, aka I think it's called Profondo Rosso, the Italian name. This was not the first Dario Argento film I saw by any means. The first one was probably Suspiria, like a lot of people. It didn't with his work at first. It was kind of it took time for me to appreciate it. Suspiria was like a visual masterpiece. I always kind of had problems with the story, but it's not really meant to be logical in that film. It's more like a technicolor nightmare, right? This one I actually first saw probably 4 years ago. And the first time I saw it, I just fell in love with it. The music, Goblin, the way it's shot, the suspense, the acting, the story, it unravels like a string. I just thought it was brilliant. I thought it was like, this term is used a lot, but it's very much like Hitchcock. This movie, like there's really such an elaborate story in this film that when you first watch it, I think it's easy to sort of miss things in it, right? Like there's so many things happening. You're like, oh yeah, this and then this and then this. I mean, and even rewatching it, I've only seen it maybe 4 times total. So every time I rewatch it, I forget something. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about this scene and I forgot how this connects to this. And there's just so many brilliant touches in this movie. And a lot of people consider this sort of the pinnacle Argento. This is kind of when a lot of film critics talk about Giallos and they talk about Argento, this is kind of the peak one they talk about with Italian cinema, right? It's the king. Suspiria is probably the most popular one. This is kind of the king of his filmography. For me, it's this and Tenebrae are my two favorites. It's interesting though, rewatching it a few times. I rewatched it again recently for this, and I don't know. I would say that my opinion sort of changed a little bit on it, not a ton, but I think in retrospect, I think the first watch of this movie, I was so blown away that I sort of didn't notice all the nitpicky things that I see now. Watching it again, I still love it, but I noticed a lot of little things in the film that kind of, I thought, they probably could have trimmed out a little here and there. There's throughout the film, it's a mystery, like we were talking about, like Jay said, there's a murder going on. They're trying to figure out, who's who's behind it. This lead character played by David Hemmings, he's trying to uncover this mystery. And there's kind of this romance angle that's kind of put in between David Hemmings and Daria Nicolodi, who was Argento's former wife for a long time and a star in a lot of his films. And I think as quirky and fun as that can be in the movie, I think for a lot of viewers that might be a little bit odd in the film itself, because it's so serious and so dark, and there's this really suspenseful thing going throughout the entire film. And then when they're on the screen, it's kind of this quirky romantic comedy type thing going on. In fact, the thing about the movie is you could take her character out of the movie, and I think it would just be as effective. I really don't think she's that critical to the plot of the film. She's just kind of there as like a sidekick or a help for him. I noticed that every time I rewatch it, it's kind of more apparent. It is an Italian film. You have to be in the mood to watch these things. Giallos and Italian films are I don't love a lot of them. I do like some of them, but some of them are very hard to get through, depending. This is one of those to where it's a slow burn. There's a lot going on, and you have to be in the right mindset to watch this movie. This is not something that I would say you watch every year. It's just, it doesn't have that kind of, as great as it is, it's something that you really have to space out. You have to watch it maybe once every 4 years, every 5 years, and then you'll pick up something later that you didn't see before. The music is outstanding in it. Goblin score. I mean, the scene where the guy is in the apartment and the doll's like going in on the bicycle and stuff like that is brilliant. The way they line the music, the score, the suspense, the action, the placement of the killer. I mean, it's masterful in that sense. And I don't know of a film that he did that as well besides Tenebrae. I think that's the only film in my opinion you can sort of sit up there is like a comparison in the 80s. Oh, there you go. It's got the score.
Yeah, no one can see unless I speak. I have the score. It is probably my favorite horror score of all time. The Fog is in second place, I think, but this is amazing.
Oh yeah, it's killer. And there's a lot of things that you pick up on multiple viewings. Like you find out spoilers at the end of the film. The killer is this mom of a character early in the film named Helga. She's the person behind a lot of this. It's her and her son, but she's the ultimate start of these killings, right? And at the beginning of the film, the first kill you see, where the character, the actor David Hemmings, I think his character's name is Marcus, he sees the kill. When he goes in to investigate, he's walking and he sees the mirror. You can see the killer in the mirror. It's right there. Like the first 15 minutes of the movie, it's there.
But
It's
it looks
just
like a picture.
exactly.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't know that first time you watch it, but watching it on repeat viewings, it's like, oh yeah, she's right there. You see her. And the way they did that is so brilliant. Like you just don't, your mind's eye doesn't really pay attention to it. I really love the kill where the lady is getting drowned in the bathtub and she decides to like write on the mirror. I thought that was so cool. Like that's just such an interesting sort of string to pull along with the story because she knows that's going to be a context clue to whoever finds her. So yeah, I mean it's I think multiple viewings with this. I think at first when I first saw it, I would have said it's like one of the greatest films ever made. I still think it's really, really, really great. I don't know if I would put it at that level anymore because I think over time I've kind of let it sizzle a little bit, so I've calmed down more. But as far as Giallos go, it's a must see. So I'm curious to see what everyone thinks.
Yeah, I think this is widely held kind of retrospectively uh, as probably the pinnacle of the Giallo or Gialli, however you say it, genre, which started with Mario Bava, I believe, in 1963 with The Girl Who Knew Too Much, which was a takeoff on a old Alfred Hitchcock film that he actually made twice called The Man Who Knew Too Much. Um, and that actually starred, what's his name? He was the cop in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, John Saxon, who got known originally a lot for doing a lot of Italian films and is in a lot of Italian films and some giallos and mysteries, that kind of thing. And Dario, of course, our first film that we did early on in our podcast, his first giallo was The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. I think that was his first film, period, was it not? I think so.
I think it was. I think it was his debut.
Yeah. So he started in the giallo genre, which at this point in time had already been going on for the better part of a decade through the 60s with directors like Mario Bava. Lucio Fulci would eventually start to make things. And there's about 6 or 8 Italian directors that were making these things, but these things weren't considered top tier films, right? Giallo actually means yellow in Italian. I think I mentioned this when we talked about The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, but that was the color of these kind of dime store detective novels that always had kind of like a murder mystery, serial killer type thread through them, and they were considered just pulp fiction. So it would be the equivalent of like a pulp fiction thing in America would be these Giallo things. And they were considered B movies for the most part. Later, uh, people like Dario would come along and try and elevate them. And then once they started with their visual style, kind of emulating some of the stuff, and camera tricks and stuff, and building of tension that like Hitchcock kind of made popular. And then they started drawing comparisons to Hitchcock, which really Argento was the first guy to really uh, be mentioned in the same sentences as Hitchcock with these types of films. That's when it really elevated the genre. So he did not create the genre, but he started in the genre. He elevated the genre. That's how he got his start. He did the famous trilogy of they call it the Animal Trilogy, which started with the Bird with the Crystal Plumage, then the Cat o' Nine Tails, which stars Carl Malden's nose and Carl Malden. Um, and was it Four Flies
Or
on Grayville?
flies on, yeah.
I've still never seen that one. That's on my to-do list. I mean, it's always kind of got middling reviews compared to the rest of his, so I'll eventually get around to it. It's not as easy to find, but I'm sure it's on Tubi at any given time at this point in time. But back in the day, it was a harder DVD to find. With this film, I first watched this film with the terrible American cut, which is like 94 minutes long. And they cut some of the gore, they cut a lot of the story, a lot of that socio-political like 70s stuff that's really there with the main guy and the girl. Well, a lot of their talk, all that was cut for the American audience. So, and I watched this in like into 2002, early 2003, because the American cut specifically of this film, which was called Deep Red, the Hatchet Murders, fell into public domain in the early days of DVD. So it become on all these terrible compilations, which I started getting into when I first got into DVDs. Like it started with like 10 movie sets, 20 movie sets. It eventually grew to like 50 movie sets, and they were all public domain titles with like the worst versions in terms of quality. But that's how I first watched this film. And I loved it then. And I was very surprised that a Dario Argento film actually um, had made one of these weird public domain box set things back in the day. Later, I would have like the Anchor Bay release and would watch the version I think is the definitive version of this film is actually not the longest version. The longest version now is the Arrow Blu-ray that I used to have that's like 2 hours and 7 minutes long. And yeah, but none of the really any better stuff is added to it. It's just a lot more talk and a lot more of the kind of socio-political women men stuff, more of that stuff, which I could do without, honestly. I think the definitive version of this film is the one that's currently on Shudder, and I believe it's 104 minutes long, and that's the one I rewatched, and that's the one that I consistently come back to because it's the version that has a little bit of that talk but not too much to go overboard. It still preserves all of the gore and all of the death scenes and the stuff. So, and it doesn't hurt the film at all to lose those 22 minutes of added dialogue and relational stuff with the main guy and the girl. So, I think that's the definitive version if anybody's watching this. But you'll have a wildly different time potentially, depending on which film you see first of this. Like if I watched the 94-minute version, I've always loved this film, and then when I watched later versions that even restored more of the gore and a little bit more story, I was like, oh, I actually like this even better as I watch it. But if you start with like the 2 hour, 7 minute version, um, you might think gets a little bloated and you might not want to hang with it as much if you don't already love the film. I'm saying maybe don't start with that version. But historically, I think it is one of the better Giallos. I think it's a top three on pretty much anybody's list of the best Dario Argento films. A lot of people now like it better even than Suspiria. For years, Dario Argento was the Suspiria guy, and then he made all these Giallo films and some other films. That's kind of been, um, I don't know, it's been reevaluated, I think, in recent years, and now a lot of people will say that Deep Red's is his greatest. Personally, I think the most rewatchable film for me is Tenebrae, which is even a pulpier version of this. Basically, it's not directed quite as I don't think it's meant to be quite as Hitchcockian. It's meant to be a little more pulpy, which is the spirit of Giallo. But it's the one I keep coming back to because I think it's more fun. Sometimes this one is a little bit of a slog in the middle in terms of I think there's more cool things happening in the story, and this is a better constructed story, but you got to really pay attention to this. Tenebrae, I can kind of turn on and kind of just follow, and wherever I find myself in it, I'm not losing any of the story. You really got to pay attention with Deep Red, because there are a few twists and turns there with the plot, which I enjoy, but I have to be in the mood for, right? So I hope they never. I'm honestly surprised they never made a remake of this in America. With the trend towards doing that, they've already remade Suspiria now, which I actually like. In terms of the story, I think the story makes more sense in the remake, even though I think the visuals are better than the original. I feel like there's more historically, I could say, but I did. Oh, well, about the score. This was the first time for a film that I believe Claudio Simonetti is the name of the composer who become the kind of the lead of what in this film is credited as Goblins, but eventually would just become Goblin, the group that would score so many of Dario Argento's classic films, including Suspiria. You gotta love Goblin. You gotta love everything they do. What I think is interesting that I listened to in an interview is the way they did this film and several of his films was he just showed them, or he would give them like concept of the scenes, and they wouldn't even see the film, so they weren't composing to the specific beats of the film, and then they would just do like a mood piece that would go along with the concept of the scene. So unlike how they compose things now, like the orchestra or whoever's doing it will actually watch the film and they'll try and match. Dario and the editing was doing the matching. They were just pre-making these pieces, and then he's trying to fit them in. When do you cue it to kind of get through the music piece, which is an interesting way of doing it. I don't think that's really done anymore these days. I don't know if they still do it with Goblin, but 1975, Deep Red, man. I think it's Dario Argento, still a young filmmaker with just a few films under his belt. He was at the height of his powers. I don't think he ever made technically a better film than this, probably. I mean, it probably is technically his best film. Either this or I mean, I can't say Suspiria, even though Suspiria has the looks. It just don't, the story plot wise doesn't. And I think the sequels kind of diminished that. But I think this is probably technically his best film, even though it's not the one I rewatched the most. But I'm very interested in what Kellen has to say, who had never seen this before. This was a first viewing. So, Kellen, tell us how your virgin eyes and ears interpreted Dario Argento's masterpiece.
It was trash. I hate it. Next. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, what I did hate was Screenbox. Get your shit together, because when I first tried to watch this, and if you listen to our postmortem on one of the other episodes, I mentioned this briefly. It's in Italian and English and not subtitled. It's Italian and English back and forth throughout the film, and it is impossible to follow. I mean, literally within a scene, the woman is speaking Italian and then she starts speaking English, and I was in the group chat like, what is happening? Like, what do y'all have me watching? And John was just as confused as I was, and he had no idea what I was even talking about. But once I got a good version of it, I was sold. But I've talked about it before. This is my favorite style of cinema. I mean, modern stuff, better graphics, better special effects. The better writing. I really enjoy movies that are driven by the soundtrack, and like has already been said by John and TJ. I'm sure Jay owns it. This soundtrack is phenomenal. It's so good. It complements the scenes so well. It complements the time that this movie, the mid 70s. I mean, you feel like you're taken right back into the 70s when you're listening to this, but not in a kitschy way, not in like disco or Southern rock kind of music where it was, a product of the time. This is just kind of like, this to me is the soundtrack of the 70s. These kind of orchestral pieces that are kind of fun. They kind of got some weird sounds in them. They're at times a little more upbeat than they should be in scenes. But I think that adds to the fun of it. Same with the bird with the crystal plumage, with the creepy nursery rhyme in the beginning. Just like I said, I love that about cinema. That's my favorite thing, is when it all comes together and it creates art. And that's kind of what this film is. Like John said, you can pick apart things, and you can do that with any movie, even ones that I consider a 5. If you watch it again, you can look at things, but there's a reason that our favorite movies hold a special place, and it's because we were pulled into it, and despite its flaws, we love them. And I can see why this would be considered such a classic film, because it's so well done. If you've seen Jay's background with the creepy doll, holy crap, that was one of the creepiest scenes I can ever remember seeing in a movie.
It was like the guy from Saw,
real.
the doll from Saw.
Oh no, the doll from Saw is not even that creepy. He rides a little tricycle. Like, I can imagine that. This doll had no business walking across the room the way it did. It literally looked fake and real at the same time, and made me instantly uncomfortable. But I love the fact that the guy took whatever that blade was and just and then laughed, because that's what I would have done out of fear, sheer terror that thing just came flying at me. So yeah, that doll was super creepiest part of the whole film. I don't care what anybody says, even the murders in it. That part is just so out of pocket and creepy, but it fits in the quirkiness of these 70s style noir murder mystery kind of movies. The one thing I noticed between Bird with the Crystal Plumage and this, why are these random dudes deciding, I've got to solve this crime? Crystal Plumage was a writer. This guy's a pianist / engineer. Who sees a murder and is like, well, better get myself involved in that? No, I'm right out of Italy on the next plane. I don't even care if I live there. I'm going on holiday until the police catch whoever killed this woman.
And it's always Americans, right?
Why? Who stays behind? What
cowboys? Because we're cowboys.
It's like a commentary on foreigners, like what they think. I think
it's a Team America World Police. It's our job to save the world. Oh my God! Well, we are the worst, especially white men, especially in horror films. Like, you hear a strange sound, and we're like, what was that? Go investigate. Nobody does that in real life. At no point have I heard a random noise in the corner of my house and thought, well, I'm gonna go there. I just sit where I'm at and like, well, I'm gonna die here. I'm not gonna go to the murder. I'm gonna let the murder come to me. Speaking of murder, also one of my favorite psychopathic deaths I've ever seen in a horror film, the fact that he turned the hot water on, scalding hot, and then drowned her in it. Like, it's one thing to forcefully drown somebody. It's another thing to boil them while you're drowning them, but not hot enough to kill them, hot enough just to cause blisters on their face.
I think Halloween 2 took from this movie.
I
think Halloween 2 stole that.
Yeah, probably so.
You look at it and you're like, okay, so basically you've decided to the 2 worst ways I can imagine dying, burning alive and drowning, and you combine them. Like, what kind of psychopath comes up with that? Who was sitting in the room was like, what would be a cool way to kill this woman? So anyway, so the thing I really enjoy is the pacing in this kind of movie. It jumps scene to scene, but it doesn't feel choppy. That was my biggest gripe with the Lost Boys. Some of the cuts in that movie are feels like they just cut at random. Like, hey, we're at a party watching a greased up sax guy play some music, and now we're back at the farm and then it's the morning. like there's no smooth transition. It works in movies like this because it's almost like a compilation of clips telling a complete story, and it's the visuals that keep you invested in what's going on. So again, this style of movie always gets me. It doesn't matter if it's a murder mystery, if it's a drama, if it's like Chinatown, if it's like The French Connection. It doesn't Bullet with Steve McQueen. Those movies, I love that style. So I knew I was going to like this, even though the first time I tried to watch it, I couldn't understand what was going on until I found a better version. The killer being revealed to be the mom, I thought they did a good job of surprising you with that, because they show the scene where she's putting on the real thick eyeliner. And the first person you see that has thick eyeliner is the reporter. And she's kind of a quirky character, which kind of leads you in the direction that maybe she has something to do with this. She's awfully invested in this guy. But quickly you find out that it's the son, but then plot twist, it wasn't him all along. He was trying to cover for his mother. I just think they did a really good job with that, especially considering now we're almost programmed to try to figure things out early in films like this. You're not really you kind of just go along with the story, and then when it's revealed that it's the mom, you're like, oh my god, I would have never guessed. And then, like John said, there's clues, and they basically show you who the killer is at one point. But they do such a great job of camouflaging it within the scene. And you can even look at movies like The Sixth Sense, where there's clues all throughout that movie that he's, spoilers, dead, but there's clues all throughout that movie. And then when you watch it again, knowing the clues, knowing the hints, and you see them, you have a better appreciation for the filmmaking process and the director and the forethought that they had to create that. Why did the killer keep ramming that dude's mouth into everything? Of all, he could have rammed his head. She could have rammed him, his face. No, straight to the mouth, on the mantle, then on the table. And I was just like, oh my god, it's one of those things in the movies. Teeth, eyes. Everyone knows I hate eye stuff, but teeth. Anytime teeth touch something, I instantly am like shivers up. I can feel that. I can feel my teeth rubbing against the concrete in American History X, the wood of the mantle in this. I hate anytime that happens. In this one, they just hit you in the face with it, just like he was. But overall, I really enjoyed this. It didn't. I don't know what the runtime is. I don't remember. But it didn't. Whatever it was fine to me. Like TJ said, there's a bunch of different versions. The one I watched, I think, was the uncensored or unedited, the uncut, I guess. And it didn't feel like a slog. It didn't feel slow at times. I mean, of course, there's going to be some dialogue scenes that you could probably do without. But overall, I mean, it was just a fun movie, and I really enjoyed it.
I am pleasantly surprised with the way things have been going with you in movies lately, that you enjoyed this, because John talked it up when this was a bucket movie. If you've been with us from the beginning, we have a bucket with movies that we all put in there, and we were originally just going to draw from there every week, month, whenever we did this, and talk about that. So we kind of wanted to get back to that. So Deep Red was the first one I popped out of the bucket. And I can't remember, it was either me or John, one of us put it in. But this was the first Giallo that I ever saw, I'm pretty sure. Especially definitely in my lifetime, where I knew what I was doing and what I was watching. Like, I'm sure I caught like Creepers, or whatever the other name for that one is.
Phenomenon.
Like that one, when I watched it again, I guess it was probably last year, it felt very familiar to me. I feel like I've probably caught that on TV once or twice. But we say this every time when it's my turn, I go last. Most of what I has already been said. The biggest thing for me was the score, which John had a copy, I have a copy. Like, I absolutely love the score. Goblin was formed for this movie, and they kept trucking after that. So they did not exist before this movie. And I love the fact that Argento liked to have the bands wouldn't, Goblin, whoever else wouldn't see the movie, they would just do the score and then he would just put it where it goes. That was always fascinating to me. That's just like Charles Band making a poster before he has a script. Like it's just such a backwards way. And when I first started watching Giallos, and you could tell some of that, like the music, like Contagion or Contamination, that one, like that score is so uppity. And like I don't know for sure, but I would guarantee that score was not put together while they were watching that film. Like it's just too happy, and I don't know it. But this one is the same way. Like it's kind of more uppity, but it works. It works well, and they use that profondo rosso like throughout the entire film, and it just that alone won me over on this film. The film itself is great too. If you have Shudder, Joe Bob, I think it was his first season back, he did an episode on this, and I watched that to, you know, just see things you don't catch, and it's great. He has the extended version. This is what everyone should see. But yeah, it's my favorite Argento film. I actually have his top films, 17 films in order. We'll get to that here in a second. My only other thing I was going to say, the kill at the end where the son just got obliterated out of nowhere. If you took Benny Hill's music and sped that up just a tad, that's a comedy scene. That is a comedy scene. We should all, hell, when I make the reels, I might have a little snippet of that scene and put Benny Hill's music to it just so everyone can see that. Like that's how I felt. I'm like, what is happening? Like it's so slapstick, all these shenanigans are happening, and then he gets ran over. Like it's just insane. So the music on that one, if it was adjusted just a little bit, it'd been a different feel. But I love Deep Red. It's also like John and I as the physical media keepers and not the monsters that some of us or one of us is. This is one of my favorite ones I own. Why is yours black? Same one, samesies. But this is one of my favorite. Like I have a ton of movies, like thousands of movies, but this is one of my favorites. Like just the packaging and everything come with it. It's beautiful. If you haven't seen it, please go watch it. But know what you're getting into if you're not familiar with Giallo. It can be a little polarizing, for sure. That's like I thought Kelly wouldn't like it because of that, but you do like murder mysteries and things like that, and it does kind of fall in line with that. It's, you know, it's not straight up horror. It's like a Law and Order episode, you know. So
and the fact that like every Argento film has overdubbed English people, and people speaking their own languages.
That's probably what stopped me from watching more back in the day, is because I didn't like that, you know, and it also didn't make sense to me at the time. So anyways, according to Rotten Tomatoes, here's Argento's movies in order, 17 down. I think he's probably has one or two more since this list came out. Maybe, I don't know. 17 is Phantom of the Opera.
That's terrible.
Never saw that one with Julian Sands, R.I.P. 16, this should be 17. Argento's Dracula. My God.
Very bad.
My God. That was so awful. 15, The Card Player. I haven't even heard of that.
That was a decent film. It's a little Hitchcockian. Come out in like 2005, 2006. I used to have the DVD.
14, Mother of Tears from 2007.
Which is the supposed to be the last of the Suspiria Inferno Three Mothers trilogy. And that just is terrible too. Aja Argento, his daughter, is the star of that. She is the mother of tears, I guess.
Yeah. Number 13, Sleepless from 2001. Number 12, Two Evil Eyes. That was
surprisingly decent. That was one of the first Argento films I watched in 2000. And there's a famous actor, older American actor. I can't place.
Max von Sydow.
Well, he's not American. He's but he was in the original Seventh Seal. And he's the dude in Needful Things who plays the devil.
Nice. Number 12 is Two Evil Eyes, 1990. Number 11, Trauma, 1993. I actually watched that in the last calendar year. That wasn't bad.
I've seen that a couple times. That's decent.
Number 10, Inferno, which is another good one. Number 9, Four Flies on Grey Velvet, the last of the Animal trilogy. Number 8 is Phenomena, or Creepers, as it's called. Number 7, Tenebrae, number 7. I think a lot of people have that higher. I think I might too.
I think that should be a top 5 for most people, but
yeah. Number 6 is the Stendhal syndrome from 1996.
That's overrated. That's where, isn't that the one where he just cuts off a bunch of people's heads? I don't remember.
I haven't
It's
seen
not
it,
good.
so.
That's not good.
Number 5, Cat of Nine Tails, 71. That was a good one. Number 4, Opera, often overlooked.
Opera's a
Kellen,
top
that's the
5
next
of
one you
his.
should watch, Opera, because there's an eye scene with needles
Oh,
that
yeah.
you can't close your eyelid.
That's great.
Instantly
Voice.
out.
Number
Hard pass.
Number 3, Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Number 2, Suspiria. And number 1, Deep Red, which is a 93% on the tomato meter. Now, Kellen, how many of those have you seen?
You know the answer to that.
The answer is 1, everybody.
No,
The
Two.
answer
he's
is 1.
seen Crystal
Two.
Plumage.
Oh,
now.
yeah, Crystal
We
Plumage.
watched both of those on this.
I forgot about that one.
podcast.
2, everybody. If you like those, I mean, it's your genre. You know, I would definitely check out Opera and Tenebrae.
Yeah.
Suspiria's, which is, I think, the remake. We were talking earlier before we started, remakes that are better than the originals. Honestly, I think the Suspiria remake's better than the original. Is it as beautiful to watch? Probably not.
Yeah,
But
I
overall,
agree.
I think it's
The
a better
story is
flick.
better. The
Better
acting's
acting.
better.
Yeah, Mia Goth, Dakota Johnson, good flip. Okay, let's give our rankings and then we'll close up shop on this episode. I gave this one a 3.5. I, like John said, it's not something I'm going to watch every year. When I watched it again for this episode, I kind of want to make Lindsay watch it because I thought maybe she could handle it. I still want to, but I don't know. Like, I think in our group text, John, you kind of said it's like Exorcist level. I don't know if you think that anymore, but I don't think it's that level. But it's definitely like mid tier. I highly recommend it. So I gave it a 3.5. How about you, John?
Yeah, I definitely would recommend Suspiria, Kellen. It's like it's almost like a horror. It's not the same type of film, but it's almost like a horror Wizard of Oz. Like it's just like visually,
It's like a nightmare. Is what
it's
it
a
is.
nightmare, and then you can't explain it. It's just something you watch, and you're just like, what the fuck is this? I was thinking about this movie. You're talking about the '70s music. Wouldn't it be weird if they would have put like Leonard Skinner or Ram Jam in this soundtrack? That would have been so odd.
That's the Rob Zombie remake.
Now,
It
if
is-
they put Ram
Now,
Jam during that last scene,
I was about to say,
and it's
yeah.
music, I am in.
Whoa, Blackberry, blam, blam, whoa, Blackberry, blam, ah! That would have been hilarious.
But I definitely it's a really solid 4 for me. It was higher before, but I just have to say 4 out of 5. It's not perfect, but really,
It's
really
fair.
good.
TJ?
Yeah, I mean, I've probably seen this film over the years, maybe 6 or 7 times. Every time I like it. Is it a perfect film? No. But for the Giallo film genre, which is a relatively small genre, granted, Dario keeps going back to the well, and even as recently in the last few years with Adrian Brody has tried to still make some Giallo films. But it's always diminishing returns. I think this is the most quintessential version of a Giallo film. Like if you're going to watch one, this should probably be the one. So because of that, I really waffle between 4.5 and 4, but the things that I consider a 4.5, I don't think this is quite the tier, and it's not really intended to be, right? It's meant to be pulpy. So for those reasons, I kind of bump it down to a 4. But still a solid.
Am I going to
4.
have the lowest grade this week? That's new. Kellen?
Yeah, so forget everything else we said. The reel should be the end of Freebird. Lord help me, I can't change. And that's when the guy gets knocked down. Won't you fly?
Making notes right now. Notes
Freebird,
taken.
yeah. I can see
So
it, my
basically,
head's
the
cracking
ending
me
of The
up.
Devil's Rejects, but
No,
with the guy.
because they get shot, TJ. They don't get comically drugged behind a truck.
No, but it takes 7 minutes.
Anyway, 3.5 for me. I think it's a good film. Like I said, I'm probably the stingiest with all of my votes or all of my rankings. So at least I'm consistent with that. But yeah, 3.5 I think is fair for this delightful film.
Do you
Puts it at
remember what you gave
3.75.
Crystal Plumage?
Probably a 3,
Yeah.
maybe 3.5. It may have been the same. And for me, it's not like I'm not as critical. I'm. It's the same with books. If I get pulled into the story, I can let the errors, I can let the mistakes slide. Hot Rod is one of my favorite comedies of all time, and that movie is dumb as hell, but it cracks me up to this day. I still, if I'm in a bad mood, if I just watch him do the footloose scene in the woods, and then he trips shit and falls for 2 straight minutes, I'm instantly in a better mood. And that, to me, that's like a 4.5 film, and it's not. don't get me wrong, it does not deserve a 4.5.
Who wants to see me do a big ass stunt?
My favorite part about that movie is the fact that he never ever lands one. Even the very last one, the pinnacle, and it looks like it's going to be awesome, and they're going no,
It's like
and then you see him
Spirit
5
of
feet away from the
Dolphin.
motorcycle.
That was a very well written movie though. Like that one is. Like,
I'm curious though, Kellen, between Crystal Plumage and Deep Red, which do you like the most?
Deep Red soundtrack, Crystal Plumage story. I think I mean, it's kind of the same thing with the killer in the trench coat, the dark figure, but I like I just like that, the whole feel of Bird with a Crystal Plumage better, but this soundtrack is phenomenal. Like I absolutely would own a copy.
Yeah,
it's
the
amazing.
Goblin elevates all of his films. The Goblin.
I got my copy at Grimey's, but I don't think they have anymore. But yeah, all right. So that's 3.75. Call it a 4, and that's it.
What was your rating, Jay?
3.5. You and I were the same.
Okay.
That's why I was like, am I going to be the lowest one this week? Plot twist. It's a twist. All right. Thanks for listening to this episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to wherever you're listening to this podcast. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and join our group over on Facebook. After you watch this episode, if you slide into our DMs and tell us you got this far, I'll send you what's left of my Giallo and Chill pins that I had made. It's a free pin. I might throw some other things in there. I have some questionable pictures of Kellen I can slide in there. If you're interested, just let me know. But before we go, like I said, this is 4th of July week, deep red, white, and blue. So I'm going to put you boys on the spot real quick. Tell me, what is your go-to 4th of July food? John?
Hot dog.
TJ?
Also, grilled hot dog.
Kellen?
Weiners.
And I guess what I have written down, everybody, hot dog / brats. This is why we started this podcast together.
It's hard to beat a good grilled hot dog.
Fun story though, the last time that I like full on vomited was on the 4th of July. It was in my little hillbilly town. They called it Hillbilly Day. You went up into the mountains and they did a bunch of hillbilly
butt
shit.
stuff.
Yeah. Well, no, not butt stuff.
No, you said yes. You can't take it back.
They might have been doing that. I was sick, so I don't know what was happening. But I haven't thrown up since July.
Next week, Deliverance.
I haven't thrown up.
Sponsored by Oscar Mayer Weiner.
1990, and it was because it was 100 degrees outside, and I was eating hot boiled peanuts, and that was a bad combo.
That's that South Carolina shit.
Speaking of hot dogs, did y'all see the horrible news, that proof that America is going to crap? That Joey Chestnut, the 19 or 16-time world champion glizzy guzzler, is not going to be allowed to compete in the Nathan's Famous hot dog eating contest on July 4th because
he shouldn't be sponsoring other hot dogs.
They didn't sponsor him. You can't say that. Oh, you're sponsoring Impossible Dog. That's a plant-based wiener, and you're not holding up to the Nathan. What, you'd rather him have Nathan's wiener in your mouth? And yes, I know this sounds overtly gay, what I'm saying, but
I have a friend named Nathan.
Nathan, them kicking him out of the competition.
There's a lot of wiener going on in this.
There's a lot of wiener. We've definitely
this is a man during the height of his domination against Kobayashi downed 72 wieners in 10 minutes.
Wait, he beat the Japanese guy?
Kobayashi, yeah, crushed him.
Kobayashi slams it, man.
Yeah, and there's a Netflix special coming out in September about the two of them. But in the last one, he did 60 or 62 hot dogs in 10 minutes. And the next closest one was like 39 or 40. So
thumbs up.
The greatest American athlete, peak male performance. And he's not allowed to compete because he decided to get paid.
Womp womp. First of all, I just want to say I'm sorry for even asking this question that led us down this road, everybody. I do apologize. I did not know Kellen was going to call it wieners and say he wants
boycott the Glizzy Guzzle Nationals.
Glizzygate 2024.
No Nathan's wieners for nobody.
Oh, God,
you eat Oscar's wieners and Oscar wieners alone.
All right. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Go eat some wieners, hot dogs, and brats. Wow. Signing off, I'm Jay with John, Kellen, and TJ. And until next time,
Keep it spooky
suck a Nathan's hot dog.
and enjoy that wiener in your mouth.
Wow.
All right.
What a
I'm gonna
derail
change
that
real
was.
quick.